Welcome back to another episode of the Mate Night Podcast. We are ranking every film ever made. This week is Bend It Like Beckham. Now, for whatever reason, I'm going back through a few episodes just to upload them for us. We've been focusing on the YouTube channel, and it looks like there are a couple episodes where we just didn't bother recording the podcast for anybody. So here I am, reintroducing it. It's just me at the minute. I'm going to cut us in a moment. Bend It Like Beckham. You've got Keira Knightley and Parminder Nagra. It came out in 2002. We're going to rank it in 9 different categories. As always, we'll take the average. We'll see where it sits amongst the greats. And we will obviously have a couple of chats about some segments coming up as well. So strap yourself in, go get yourself a cup of tea, maybe not in that order. And let's just get straight into it.
Bend It Like Beckham. What a shout that could be.
So, do you have your score for how much you enjoy Bend It Like Beckham?
I have an enjoyment score for Bend It Like Beckham.
I've got mine.
As always, lots of thought went into it, and I didn't know. Did you find it particularly easy to rank?
Yeah, well, I found
Really?
harder ones. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, I felt pretty comfortable with where I landed on it.
I actually gave my. I didn't know what to score it, and then I did a bit of research into it, and that also. I kind of was trying not to let that affect my score too much. So,
well,
yeah,
I want to do something a little
fun.
spontaneous here. I'm going to guess your score first.
Okay,
we'll
all right.
Because Faye asks me all the time, "What do you think Harry thought of the film?"
Uh-huh.
And I never know.
Have you ever
one
been
thing
close?
we spoke about was, well, I never really come down to a specific number, and now on record I'm going to.
Okay.
And one thing that we said was, you have a very dialogue is quite a determining factor, and it wasn't exactly like Tarantino dialogue, but it also wasn't exactly in time dialogue. And so I'm gonna go, it's really tough, but I reckon you're gonna be a 7.3.
Okay.
What do you reckon I'm gonna give it?
I will say that you enjoyed it. Based on Faye's reaction as well, so I'm getting a bit of insight here. She really liked it. I don't think you would have disliked it too much. I'll give you a 6.9.
Okay.
All right.
Should we do it then?
Go on then.
All right.
Who's first? I think it's me first this time.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1.
5.3.
6.2. Right, okay. Okay, so you really didn't like it very much?
No, it's not that I really dislike. 5 in the fives is like not great, but I appreciated it as a film.
Okay.
I appreciate. It's not that I think it's a bad film. That's what I want to say. It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the big
personally,
part
my score, I couldn't really give it that high. It felt very dated.
yeah.
Very dated.
Very, very dated.
Cheesy, corny lines, as you know. I didn't find it that funny, although I did laugh a couple of times.
Same.
And I know it was going for humour. Obviously, I'm not exactly the target market at all. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's relevant to people, you know, obviously women in sport, people with different ethnic backgrounds and discrimination and some kind of LGBTQ stuff. None of that is something that speaks to me very much.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that I dislike a film. I just felt like it was very much
It wasn't targeted at you.
It wasn't targeted at me, but the plot didn't really entice me enough where I didn't mind, or I still could appreciate it. I was just like, it didn't really interest me.
I think we're both very much on the same page here then. Yeah, I think the people who I said will really enjoy it are, it's not, the budget was like the budget was 5 million. So it's not a Gladiator, it's not like an epic cinema history thing. So if you're looking for that in films, it's not for you. It's got this kind of happy-go-lucky sort of energy where it's just like, you know, it's just an entertaining, fun film. You're not going to get a Nolan plot. You're not going to get Ridley Scott, you know, production. It's your classic story, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of romance, but the people who will connect to it on an even deeper level were particularly women who are interested in non-traditional things, but also people who grew up in the UK in noughties, because I thought that there was a lot of humor in it that was like, you know, clearly aiming at being quite relatable for people who grew up in those. And there's a lot of kind of that the British culture and the British Indian culture. There was a lot of humor around that. So people who can connect with it on that level will get more out of it.
And I guess some of the charm will come from that connection.
Yeah.
I've had similarly feel-good films which weren't necessarily targeted at me that I've enjoyed more.
Sure.
Like, I really enjoyed The Full Monty when I watched that a few years back, which I was surprised. I don't think I'm exactly the target market, but it's definitely kind of a kind of feel-good 90s, early 2000s film about, you know, working class people who are taking chances and getting in situations which you wouldn't typically see.
Sounds similar.
And although there's less, you know, is talking about a male experience there, it's not necessarily like a me film. But I really enjoyed that, and I like chick flicks as well. I do enjoy. I enjoy romance stories. I enjoy rom-coms. And I don't know. I thought that the romance in this was didn't really work for me. I didn't find it particularly funny, and some of the, I guess, narrative choices just weren't my cup of tea.
It was narratively, it was very basic. I thought, like, you could kind of just see from 20 minutes in, you're like, this is exactly what's going to happen in this movie. Do you know what I mean? There was very little that kind of came as a surprise at any point. So yeah, I think if it's not aimed at you, then like,
yeah, I think that the scenes where they were trying to go for, so for instance, the scene where, spoilers for all this, by the way, the scene where, and anything between the coach and her, the romance between her and the coach, like when he was supposed to be kind of giving her advice, or, you know, the burn, for instance, that scene I felt was a bit smarmy, and I don't know, felt a bit forced, which I was very surprised at to find out after that they wrote that into the script because it's a real burn that she has. I don't know if you heard about that. I didn't
know that.
And that's the real story behind it. So,
right.
I mean, I remember thinking at the time, like, this scene is just doesn't work very well. And she makes kind of a joke about,
I laughed at that joke.
Put me off, baby. I didn't land for me.
Yeah, okay.
So then when I found out, oh, that's real, I was like, oh, okay. It's weird that I found that there was not much value in it at all, because you'd have thought that would be quite authentic. Maybe it's just their whole relationship, like how it came full circle at the end and they ended up deciding to be in a relationship, or they were going to try, needed the secret kiss, supposedly.
Where everyone pretended not to notice when every single one of them knew what was going on.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the tradition within, you know, the Punjabi Sikh culture, and that's something that just I can't relate to at all, but obviously very important that it's expressed. I don't know, sometimes when things like that happen, for me, if I feel like it's being a bit preachy, I struggle.
Yeah.
With the utmost respect, like, it just felt a bit kind of
100%.
Bit too much.
Yeah. Some people like that in films and some don't. Yeah. And when I was preparing for the Should You Watch It, that was another thing I said, where it was like, if you like films to have very sort of I can't remember the wording I used, and I'm trying not to sound disrespectful in saying it, but almost prescriptive themes, where it's kind of telling you, like, this is right and wrong, and this is, you know, it's trying to a commentary on culture and society. If you like that, then this film has that.
Yeah.
If you don't like that, then this film has that. So maybe just bear that in mind. I'm like you. I don't really. I think that for me, if you're going to do a commentary in a film, you've got 2 hours. Make sure it's nuanced. Do you know what I mean? And so I don't mind commentary across the board, but it has to be done in a way that says to me that they've thought quite hard about, you know, what the reality of the thing that they're commenting on is, rather than just saying, like, this equals bad, this equals good.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, you've got 2 hours, and that's the most nuanced you've been able to come out with. And it was a little bit of that for me in this, where it was kind of like, it was very blatant, the message that they were trying to.
Yeah, and it all turns out well, and it's I think that the popularity of it, I mean, it was a bit of a cultural phenomenon. I mean,
Okay.
it's still the most popular global football film.
Is it?
Of all time.
Really?
Yeah, globally. It's what it's earned the most. In terms of the impact it's had on female football, like what the director, Gurinder Chadha, said that she has heard, since that one of the recent all US team winners of the World Cup, they said, like, every single team member said that they were influenced by Bend It Like Beckham. And you see now, certainly in English football, grassroots female football, how it's grown since then.
Right.
Like they couldn't even find professional teams then. They weren't a professional team.
Yeah.
Whereas now that's, it's a completely different landscape. And genuinely, that film will have had a massive positive impact on that, without a doubt. But for me, I found it very interesting that originally the script actually had a tragic ending. Where did you hear about this? That one of the original draft of it.
I didn't hear this. No.
So it was written by Gulgit. I might be misspelling this, but I'm not going to pronounce her name because I've written it down. I don't want to mispronounce it. But Golgi is a woman who wrote the original draft of the script, and then Gurinder and her husband Paul Maeda Burgess helped to redraft it, and Gurinder directed it, and then Golgi was kind of the original writer of the story, and her version had an ending where the father ends up dying. And Thingy's character, Jess, is not able to go off to America. She basically has to... She can't take the scholarship and has to come home. And they were like, okay, that's too dark. We're going to completely rechange it, make it this feel-good story, which is very interesting because it's almost a much more interesting story because of...
It's more palatable, and so it's
and things... For most people, things don't work out as you want. And, to have something that ultimately would have failed, it would have been very interesting to see that.
I think they made the right decision.
They did in terms of I imagine the impact of the film, but I found it very interesting to think of a completely different film.
I feel like you'd have to produce the film quite differently if you were going to do that kind of ending. Do you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't have stuck that ending onto that film; it just wouldn't have felt right.
I don't think the original draft was even a love story. They Gurinder came in and completely changed up.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, we want to make it a more feel-good film. We want a more positive ending. We're going to have a rom-com element. So apparently it wasn't particularly funny, and they added a lot of the comedic elements. So the film it's almost a completely different interpretation of what the original story was.
That's really interesting. And I tell you what, especially your first point about the influence in football, that should go into I haven't got anything about that in the should you watch it thing. Would you just jot it down somewhere?
I've got written down quite a bit about the cultural impact.
If you just put a title list of just stuff to come back to later to add into it, we'll just go over it more thoroughly, because that's going to be... I think if anyone's trying to decide whether to watch this movie, one of the things that I would quite like to know is if that film has had a massive global influence in terms of a major sport. So, and
I would say, I mean, when we decided we wanted to do a football film, this was like it comes up like almost immediately.
Right.
You think it's a real heavy hitter of its genre.
Yeah. Well, there was something I wanted to get onto and get your opinion on. And I want to start in a specific place and then broaden out afterwards. Yeah. You mentioned the romance not being that good. Now, I didn't mind it narratively because it didn't feel like it derailed the story, which is important for me. But I thought that part of the romance issue was the performance of the bloke, Joe. So I do want to get your thoughts on performances generally, but I thought that it wasn't the character that was the issue, but to me it seemed like the actor he came across it was difficult to read whether he was being sweet or actually kind of rude, and sometimes he came across a bit smarmy, and sometimes and I thought it felt like it wasn't actually an on the page issue but actually a performance issue. What do you reckon?
Potentially. I mean, they are like the worst. I've always disliked those roles, like
which ones?
The love interest when it's a bloke who has to kind of be is really there for his looks.
Okay.
And there's not too much substance. I know they try to add substance to the character, like his relationship with his father, but essentially, as an actor, I imagine this person is used to exploring a much more richer themes, and be quite difficult to then go to just being kind of about your looks more.
Do you think maybe being a little bit generous?
Maybe
there?
a bit, yeah. I did think he was. I thought the chemistry between him and Jess Paminda Nagra wasn't great, and I just found it very awkward, his role and how he
so
went.
You think
about
it could have been? You think it could have been just more of a character issue than a performance issue?
To be honest, I don't think that. Now, if that came out, it probably would have been a lesbian love story.
Yeah.
Like, just the way the times have shifted, and in all honesty, I don't always like when you put something in like representation for the sake of it.
Yeah,
but it probably would have fitted better. I thought that he was a bit like, let's put a bloke in let's have like this romance angle just because. Yeah, and it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned a minute ago how they changed the script.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I felt when I was watching it was they've done a lot of things to make this have a broad appeal. So it was quite clearly a story that was really written for and about British Indian girl.
Yeah.
And then I felt like Keira Knightley's character and family were there to give the white audience somebody to relate to, and that was an intentional choice for that purpose, and the writers probably wouldn't have done it if they weren't going for broad appeal specifically,
which is again adds to what we spoke about, how it kind of dates like these days that people don't really feel the need for like token let's put token white people in so that the white audience can relate to it. It does actually add a bit of dating to it. I agree with you completely that the white family is almost there, so that there's representation for people who they need to see it in order for it to be successful.
Exactly.
On the point for Joe, the Irish coach, that was another change that they made. So not only did they add the love story, but also from Gulgit's original script, the coach was a like old Scottish,
right?
And in the mold of Alex Ferguson, and they were like, "We're going to make him a young hunk."
It's smart. I mean, like you can, especially given the thing you were saying about the influence it had. They clearly knew what they were doing there, and I don't think necessarily that they did anything wrong. But it makes for a less enjoyable film for me personally. Yeah,
But not to say that it's bad. It's definitely not a bad film. Not really for me. And there are things in films I don't really like. As I say, kind of the dialogue's a bit cheesy. Some things felt a bit unnecessary to the plot, and there are a few elements which seem to be added just to broaden the wider appeal. Having said that, there were things I really liked. Was there anything in particular that you were like, I did? Or what was your favourite part, I guess?
I really liked Jess, the character and the performance. Yeah. I thought that, and because she had such an important role, that made a big difference for me.
She was great, wasn't she?
I thought the character was really cool, and I really liked her. And I also thought that she felt the most natural out of all of them when I was watching her on screen. I felt like she generally... I know you said about the burn scene, and I'm not very good at commenting on performances generally, but I liked her anyway. I liked her, and I liked her character. I thought that her mate, she had that mate who turned out to be gay. I quite liked him. I thought he was quite a fun element.
I thought that scene was great. I thought his coming out scene was... I genuinely like, it was cool, wasn't it? Yeah. I did not expect that.
And then the whole him sort of saying, we're going to get married, so that, it was a bit dumb, but I liked it. It was,
I thought the way they did it as well, like, no, Jess, I really like Beckham. When that turned, when the wheels turned for me, I was like, "That's brilliant!
Let's go!"
That's hilarious.
That explains why he's so cool about everything.
And I liked I liked that choice because I was starting to feel sad that he obviously likes her and it's not going to go that way. And then it turns out he was gay.
And he was
brilliant.
And he was just a nice, likable side character that caused no trouble and just helped.
just a good guy.
They're always the characters which in really well-written stories end up being the bad guys. You know, because I love them. I'm like, great, a straightforward character, no
Eisen.
trouble, and then Eisen turns up. I'm like, well, there goes my favorite character.
I think that his part was really good. Some of the mum's lines. So Juliet Stevenson plays Paula Paxton, which is Jules' mum. So Keira Knightley's mum. She was a bit. Like some of it I thought was a bit too much, and sometimes she had some lines that really did hit. That's for me. It was, she's a caricature, which sometimes worked, sometimes didn't.
I like that.
The way I'd describe it, and part of my big issue with it, and it reminds me of In Time, where it was specifically the smarmy one-liner dialogue that I don't like.
You wouldn't like that.
So it wasn't quite like cut from that cloth exactly, but it felt to me sometimes like this was a soap. Like the way it was produced, written, even shot, like it felt quite cheap.
Sure.
But it looks like you could have just had the Burns conversation, even the way they delivered the lines.
Yeah.
Felt like it was just a scene from Hollyoaks or EastEnders. Okay. And that, when I feel like something isn't really a film or doesn't elevate itself beyond the level of a soap, that gives it a bit of...
That's interesting, that, yeah.
You just
I
remind
think
me
I'd agree with
of
that as well.
Or a TV movie.
I've never watched any soaps, but what I would say is it felt really obvious to me that one of the main things that this film offers is a very relatable... It captures the essence of growing up in Britain in the early noughties. It really felt like they were representing that world quite well. And with that clearly heavy influence of what it's like to be in British working class culture in the early 2000s, it would make sense that it would be quite heavily influenced by these soaps because they were obviously absolutely huge back then. So it kind of makes sense that the soap would have that kind of impact on the way the story was written and presented. Yeah,
and it's a fair point. And I mean, part of it will also be just, the budget. And
I agree. 5 million. That's a small budget.
It's not very much, but it did, even like the montagey scenes and kind of the weird panning of the camera through certain shot selection. And of course, like the scenes, the dialogues and the performances, they all felt very much like you could have just taken a scene from Hollyoaks and popped it in.
I tried not to be too harsh on the shooting of it.
Yeah.
In my own head, because partly I don't have a great frame of reference for what a low budget early 2000s film should look like. But to me, there were a few moments that were really ugly. Like really just like very bad. There were a couple of like filters that they'd put on where like the top half of the screen would just be like brown. You ever seen a vignette on a picture where the edges kind of go darker? It did the same, but it was halfway across the screen. It was like the sky half, and it was brown instead of black.
Right.
And it was I guess it was trying to do like a kind of vintagey thing or something. I guess I don't really know.
Yeah.
But there were just a few decisions like that where I was like, even with a low budget, that's just ugly. You know what I mean? You didn't have to do that, and so that did take away from it a bit for me. But again, like in terms of my enjoyment, that detracts. But in terms of should you watch it, you just have to be aware that you're not watching Dune. You're not going and watching some kind of massive epic cinema masterpiece. You're watching an entertaining film, In some ways, the soap thing is kind of a very good way.
Yeah, soaps are really popular. Like, there is 100% an audience for this film, and we
just not me.
Neither of us really fall into that. to be perfectly honest,
I think we've done a really good job of being very nice about.
I think we're trying to be nicer. We're trying to be more fair in our criticism.
I agree with that. Yeah. Because to be honest with you, Fred, it was shit.
This film was
hated it. It was an awful film. It was so bad.
I just want to see white blokes playing football.
I'll tell you what, actually, no, that does raise another point I wanted to make, which was in a similar vein to Challengers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go expecting a film with any in-depth football stuff. It's not that. You don't really follow any football games closely. There's no story around the development of a game. In fact, if you follow football very, very closely, which I do not. Some of the shots, they would like kick the ball and it would be very clearly not going in the net, and then the next shot it would go in the net, and like it would just kind of, I think if you are looking for a film that ticks that football box for you, it's less about that and it's more about the characters and the development and the overcoming the norms.
Yeah, it was clear they didn't have, like, it's similar to the Challengers. They did it a bit better in Challengers, but they weren't, former tennis players or, in this case, former footballers. They were people who were doing a job, and then they'd do kind of cuts to make it look like they were doing a bit better than they were.
Which in terms of the production, fine. In terms of whether you want to watch this film or not, if you want a film that gives you football, specifically football, because there are, like Wimbledon, right? I've only watched clips of this, but my understanding with that film is it really does quite closely follow a lot of the actual tennis that's played in it, right? You've seen this one.
I've not watched the full film, but I've seen bits.
My understanding is that there are. I mean, I try my best not to reference animes too often, but when we watch the volleyball one, Haikyuu, that follows stories of the actual game taking place. And so, if you want volleyball, not that I follow volleyball closely, but it gives you a narrative around volleyball specifically. Whereas to me, this film didn't really give a narrative around football specifically. It almost could have just been any sport.
Yeah, it was more a vehicle to express whatever commentary.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is exactly the same as Challengers.
Exactly.
Tennis doesn't matter. No matter how much the whole point is that it's all about tennis. It's similarly here. The football is just some vehicle through which they tell their story.
Although Challengers would have been absolute chaos if it was an 11-a-side team.
Yeah. Jesus.
Luca would have had a great time.
That would have been his favourite. He wouldn't have been able to complete the film.
It's only men. It's only men. Under 21's men.
And there's a sexy ref. Yeah, I think... I think
it had to be tennis for Challengers.
Yeah, I did like bits. The coming out scene was really cool. You're right, Paminder's performance was great, and I mean, just as a cultural moment, I enjoyed the fact that I found myself watching Bend It Like Beckham.
Okay, I like that.
You know what?
I didn't know about it.
It's a name.
You
must have heard of...
I've heard of it, but I feel like it would have actually added to the experience knowing what you told me a minute ago about the impact that it's had on the world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I find myself quite a bit now that we're watching not just big films or like relevant films coming out, like watching films that I imagined myself never watching. And
sure.
I do get enjoyment out of that as well.
Yeah. I know, and I did get that a little bit, even though I didn't know the impact. I'd heard of this Bend It Like Beckham. I knew it was pretty successful. Like I've heard of it.
Yeah, and even the nostalgia of
which, if you follow this book, you'll know that if I've heard of it, it's a big film. Because I don't really watch films.
But even the nostalgia of like the Beckham at the height of his fame, which he really... Another thing I found out researching this is he kind of timed his superstardom even better. Like this was in the works from around 98.
Okay.
Don't suppose you know much of the history of David Beckham around that time?
Incidentally, I did watch... Was there a Netflix thing or something?
You watched that? Okay.
But I don't remember any of the dates.
Right. So 98 was the World Cup where he got sent off against Argentina. And he was kind of... His stock was at an all-time low. He was effectively...
Public enemy number
one. Yeah, he was potentially the most famous sports person in Britain at that time. He was kind of a bit of a celebrity. I think he might have started going out with Posh Spice by that point, and then it took a dip. I mean, it was very infamous at that point, but they were burning effigies of him. And that was when it was originally going to come out, but his stock was so low. And so it didn't get picked. It didn't get picked up. Like I think they'd created the script at that point. It was in the works, and then it came out in 2002, where he'd essentially had this meteoric rise after scoring a goal that sent England to the World Cup against Greece. He scored a goal that tied them and sent them to the World Cup.
In what year was that?
I think he scored it in 2001.
Right, okay.
And it came out in 2002. The World Cup was happening in 2002. He also had broke his metatarsal in the weeks leading up to the World Cup.
Okay.
When this was coming out. And so Bend It Like Beckham became... Basically, all of the tabloids were using puns based on his metatarsal break and the film. So it was like Mend It Like Beckham, Break It Like Beckham. And so it ended up being... Yeah, brilliant. It ended up being huge for the popularity of the film. It was a big kind of... It ended up being quite a happy marketing coincidence that he had this accident because it helped catapult the film. The film obviously became big in the UK, but globally had very big reach.
Right.
For instance, it's a weird one. It is to mark 10 years of North Korean and British relations. They released it on North Korean television, an edited version on North Korean television.
Really?
Supposedly, according to the British ambassador to South Korea, Martin Uden, he said it was the first ever Western-made film to air on TV in North Korea.
No
in
way.
2010. Yeah,
that's wild.
Don't know why. I don't know why it was. Beckham must be popular. I think.
Okay. Yeah.
He's a much bigger brand now than he was when it came out, like globally.
Okay.
Whereas in the UK, he was massive, but.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I missed all of that. That's so interesting.
I mean, it was a real, like, Paminda Nagra became a bit of a sensation. Keira Knightley obviously went on to become a bigger star, and she actually landed Pirates of the Caribbean based on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was the year after,
wasn't it? The producer
for
for Pirates of the Caribbean saw this based on his...
really?
His kids were like, watch this, and he was like, that is a pirate.
He watched this
a
and went,
pirate.
look at that performance. That's the person I want in my film.
Paminda Nagra ended up getting a successful, US television. She was on ER, which is very famous.
Okay.
Essentially like a... I don't know what they're called over there. If they call them, what was it? Hollyoaks EastEnders. What was I just talking about?
Paminda doing ER.
What are they called? Hollyoaks and EastEnders.
Soaps.
Soaps. I don't know if they have soaps specifically, but ER anyway is a very famous hospital drama.
Okay.
And she got a recurring role on that based on.
Right,
They wanted an Asian doctor, and they ended up putting the dots together and having her go in. She also was awarded Football Personality of the Year at FIFA's awards.
Is she any good at football, Paminda?
Neither of them played. I mean, they'd kicked a ball, I think, before, but
for sure.
Paminda and
you
Keira,
could do like in the few weeks prep. You could,
they had someone come over and run coach them for 8 hours a day. Apparently, they did
8 hours a day?
Very rigorous training for it. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, which was really necessary.
Fair enough. You can really tell. Keira Knightley.
Yeah.
Performance.
You know what? Keira Knightley is one of those where I just find nothing wrong with her, but she just reminds me of like drama school girls.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, kind of just a bit annoying.
Yeah.
Without it being her fault.
I agree with that.
Her personality kind of grates me a bit. So.
But explain to me the accent situation in this film with her, because for me, she just sounded very weird, but I don't really know why.
I don't think she was doing it. That's just
her voice, is it? Right.
Which is quite
I
posh.
found her delivery. I tell you what, I was trying to figure out why I didn't like the way that Keira Knightley was behaving on screen, which I could put down to performance, I guess. It felt almost like she was overacting a little bit at times. Would you say that would be fair? There were kind of moments where she'd kind of almost be like a bit too enthusiastic, and you're like, oh.
I think it added to that soapy feel for me, where you have people who are really going for it, and some people are a bit less natural, I guess. And her performance is quite out there. She's quite big in her reactions, and sometimes it doesn't.
Would that not count as being a bad performance if you're not supposed to be doing that for the character?
I'm not the biggest fan of Keira Knightley as an actress.
Sure.
Like her style, I don't think she offers. Certainly in the films I've seen of her, she doesn't offer that much range. She kind of plays herself.
Yeah.
And herself, I find, can be a bit annoying. Whereas you have Parminder Nagra, who was pretty understated, and it worked quite well.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess the clash sometimes works, having someone who's a bit more abrasive.
Yeah.
But I completely get what you mean.
So maybe I'm being a more harsh of the performance than maybe I should be. And it's more just like, it's not necessarily a bad performance. It's just maybe not stylistically what I was looking for.
Yeah, but like...
We're being very
really
fair.
We're being
really
so
nice.
We really try.
Because to be honest with you, mate, I thought it was shit. I thought the film was shit and I thought she was shit.
Yeah, fair enough.
I hated it.
There you go.
And it was dumb, mindless. What was it? It was an absolute pile of garbage.
Other interesting points that I made. The guy who played the dad, Anupam Kev. He is a very famous Bollywood actor.
Okay.
Apparently, at that point he'd been in over 200 films. I can only imagine he's been in.
I thought he was quite good. I thought he might be quite good.
Well, you talk about the big acting style of Bollywood. Apparently, they had a Bollywood take for him every time. So he would do his first take, and they were like, "Calm it down."
Right.
He said it was really challenging,
trying to be more realistic.
It's very different styles of performance. And also Juliet Stevenson, who played the Paul Paxton. She is known as a kind of period actor, a very serious dramatic actor usually. So some of the famous films, Emma, Truly Madly Deeply, they're both quite famous period pieces of the 90s. And so this was it was quite a surprise getting her as a comedic character.
Yeah, okay.
And apparently, she was like, I really enjoyed it.
That character was an absolute menace. Oh my goodness me. You just never knew what you were going to get with her.
You know what was wild?
Every time she was on screen, it was like, oh my God, where's this going to go?
It was wild, like, just thinking about this being, I suppose, quite an LGBT positive film, or it's thought of as quite fondly in that community.
Yeah.
And thinking about it now, like, the characters that were kind of anti-gay, they weren't anti-gay in the way that people would be now, where it's very much we are against homosexuality.
Yeah.
It was a bit more of an understated, like, the mood in general is that homosexuality is a bit weird. Did you get that sense? Like, she was like very against the idea of her daughter being gay, although openly happy, completely accepts people as lesbians. She just doesn't want her daughter to be. Yeah. Which I don't think people would... They wouldn't approach it in that way now, because it kind of reflects people generally at the time not being as comfortable with gayness as they are now, which I found quite interesting. Like,
to be honest with you, I felt like I noticed the same thing and felt like it was a better representation of a problem they were trying to solve than what a lot of them do now.
Yeah,
so that is actually kind of a thing that I've seen, whereas a lot of what I see in films now, I'm like, I've never in my life seen people behave like this.
Yeah, for sure. It was interesting, particularly because the dad was very accepting, wasn't he? But I think even he maybe thought, oh, she might actually be gay by the end when they saw her kissing.
He was a good character.
He was good. It was nice. We liked him. It was nice for the...
He was another token, obviously, but...
Yeah. I guess it was nice to have a good male role model.
Yeah.
Not always the case in films like that.
Both the dads were, at heart, good character people. They were good people as characters. Do you know what I mean? Like, they did genuinely just want the best.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because obviously this really reflected a lot of like Gurinder's experiences growing up as a British Asian, and having kind of the mother figure was quite reflective of her experiences with not only her family but other mothers in the Asian community, in the British Asian community, and yeah, it was interesting that kind of the women in the family seemed to be the harder taskmasters. And
I tell you what, as well, combining that and what we were just saying a second ago, the message there was obviously feminism involved, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they didn't try. What they were essentially saying was that women go through these specific problems, right? But they didn't extend that in the way that current cinema does by saying like, and therefore all women are good. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It still painted women to be capable of being just as bad as anyone else for creating these problems, and still got that message across. It felt almost less prescriptive because it was saying like, look, everyone is kind of responsible for these behaviors. It's not like a men versus women thing. It's just, and it did feel like the messages that it was putting across were certainly more representative of what I think my experience with reality has been like. Do you know what I mean?
Some points it was like you say. Actually, Jules's mum's reaction to her being a lesbian seemed a lot more realistic than films that you might see now, which seem to hit over the head the more discrimination element rather than sometimes it's in society it can be a bit more subtle, like it's still discriminatory, but it's not necessarily that overt. I mean, she was quite overt when she went up to Paminda and was like, get your lesbian feet out of my shoes.
That got a bit wild. That was like,
get your lesbian feet out of my shoes. But
that was just crazy. That scene was absolutely bananas.
And I did find it quite funny, like that the aftermath of that, where the Punjabi family is like saying, "Oh, it's these Indian girls, with English girls
British
with
girls.
short hair."
Yeah.
There were some really funny moments.
I tell you what, it could have been an atrocious film for me in terms of what I look for in a film. It could have been really, really bad, but I actually think that they got a lot of things right. Yeah, and it meant that even though it was definitely not my sort of film, I don't really watch football. I don't relate to a lot of the struggles that it's trying to represent. You know, I'm not really that keen for romancy stuff or kind of these happy-go-lucky ones. Like, none of this stuff is really things that I look for in a film. And yet I was still happy to give it something in the sixes because at the end of the day, I was like, I can appreciate that what they've made here is actually not a car crash even by my own sort of preferences.
Which is part of the reason I think so. That point ties to my outlook on this film compared to, say, a Mad Max or the original Mad Max, which I gave similar scores to, but was a lot more disparaging to. And it's because I expect more from something that I'm going to... the Mad Max films belong in categories of films that I typically should appeal to me. Yeah. So if you don't hit that mark, even if it gets a similar score, because I think 5.3 is pretty indicative of the scores I gave for the original Mad Max films. But I've been fairly even-handed in my critique of this film, and it's because I didn't expect to really like this, and it's not for me. And although I didn't really like it,
it was shit.
Maybe the max that these films will get, or films like this will get, is a lot lower than a really hard-hitting crazy action film, and so I'm going to give it more benefit than that.
It certainly changes a lot about how you feel about the film, doesn't it? Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Having said all that, I didn't enjoy it.
No, I won't be watching it. I don't think I'll be watching it again. Like fives and sixes aren't, like, we're not sat here saying that we really enjoyed this film, but more that, like, we didn't enjoy it, but we can appreciate what it has to offer. It's just not really something we enjoyed very much, and it's not really something that was really aimed at either of us.
Equally, we spoke to Faye, your girlfriend, just before this, and she said 7.9. So, and she said she really enjoyed it. Yep. And like, clearly there are people that are going to really enjoy this film.
For sure, yeah.
Like, and you might be one of those people. Yeah, not quite.
I think as well, like, one of the things that's becoming really clear to me is how much of your mood impacts what film you should be watching. And like, one of my favorite films is Apocalypse Now. Like, not my favorite film, but it's one of. But there are certainly times where if you put that on in front of me, I will not be enjoying it. Like, I will not enjoy that film at all. And similarly, you've got films at the other end where it's gone from all this kind of artistic, cinematic stuff all the way to, like, this is just aimed at being an enjoyable film with a message. And it's like, there are moods that I can be in where I would be much more receptive to that, and moods where I am really looking for something a bit more Inception, Apocalypse Now, Dune, and this kind of film would really just bore the living daylights out of me.
Yeah.
So you need to be in the mood for something that's just kind of a bit chilled out, just fun entertainment, broad appeal. You know, stick it to the man. Yeah. You know, just kind of like...
Bit of 2000 throwback.
2000,
You're feeling a bit like...
Spice Girls soundtrack. You know.
That was a good line. What was it about?
Sporty Spice is the only one.
The only one without a boyfriend. I thought that was one of the ones where I laughed.
Yeah. There were a couple of good jokes in there. There was a film we watched the other day. I think it was Challenges, where I laughed a similar number of times, like 3 times in the movie. But in Challenges, they tried to make me laugh 3 times. In this, they tried to make me laugh more like 10 times, and only 3 of them landed for me.
Yeah.
But there is more there as long as this is for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Do we want to try and wrap this up before 1 hour and get a couple critical scores?
I reckon we do critical score,
and then we tie things up and
work out what the score is.
All right, 6. So let's just pull that up then.
Try and get a minute timer up.
We got a thing down there. We'll try and just... I think... oh, that's the wrong one. I think I really enjoyed the last time we did this, that there was... we just went through at the pace that we wanted to go through, with a little bit of urgency.
Okay.
So you were 5.3?
5.3.
And I was 6.2. Okay. I'll do that later. So, plot. Do you want me to order them whilst you start the ball rolling?
So I'm thinking below 7.
So I've highlighted the 6s.
And I'll tell you why. It's not just because it was basic. It's because everything that was an issue wasn't really an issue.
For example?
Like, the kiss that they had was the worst thing in the world for Jules' character until it didn't really matter because of the scout coming over. And then when she did come to sort of apologise to Jess's character, that was a real issue for Jess's character until it wasn't really, and she just decided to come over. It was all a case of them getting together at the end was a big issue until it wasn't when he came over at the end.
And that just kind of was abandoned a bit.
Yeah, I think the social commentary... fair enough, and there were things that while I don't feel like I learned anything particularly, I can appreciate that those things need to be said. Mm-hmm. I thought a lot of it was a bit like, right, okay, fair enough, that's happening now, and then this is happening, and then there's an issue which is resolved immediately, and it wasn't that much of an issue. You know, I
think as well for me, an additional thing with the plot that I wasn't crazy about was it felt a little bit like the pacing was off towards the start of the film. It felt like it took a while to get going for me. I was more invested after about half an hour, but it took a while before I was like, I don't care about what's
I had to pause at one point thinking there'd been quite a lot and there'd only been 27 minutes. Yeah. I was like, oh man. Because the
pacing was very slow.
Yeah, I'm not enjoying this very much to start. And it got going a bit. But
so with all that in mind, the things that it did have going for it was it did feel good having that sort of like she made it to the final and she, that was like I enjoyed that sort of I keep coming to the word redemption even though that's definitely not the right word, but do you know what I mean, that kind of overcoming that obstacle and getting to the final and having that big moment and
getting the scholarship,
that was good. That was a nice bit of the plot that
it wasn't terrible, like it was fine.
I don't think this is very good. I don't even think it's 6.
I'm thinking 4.
I think probably 4. We've got 2 4s. I'm not going to read them out.
Name them?
A Few Good Men.
Right.
And then Empire Strikes Back and Heat. I think 4. I think 4 is a good score for that. I don't think the plot was that good.
Yeah. Was it worse than Heat?
It was definitely worse than Heat. I don't know why we gave it a 4.
I remember thinking the plot of Heat, although fun, was ridiculous and made no sense. I think
Okay,
that's why
was it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember really lobbying it for it to be a low score.
Okay,
so we'll have to listen. Fair.
I think that going any lower than 4 is really saying this was bad.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Character.
Okay,
Some good characters.
I quite liked the characters.
I think it was one of the higher points. Character and some of the performances were pretty good.
Performance is a separate category.
I know, but I mean, generally,
Sure.
those two elements were pretty good. Jess was good.
Yep.
Jules was necessary.
Character-wise was
I guess.
fine.
Joe was, I guess, probably my least favourite character. I don't think he was... They could have had the old Scottish coach, and I think no love story for me.
Yeah, I agree
They
with
could
that.
have made it a bit more interesting. The parents were good. Bit caricature-y, but still...
Character-wise, fine. Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest...
Pinky was quite fun. I quite
Yeah,
liked
Pinky was
her.
it, and I liked that
Jessie-
she wasn't just a bitch sister. She was pretty,
She was actually quite complicated for a side character.
actually
Bordering on unpredictable.
You know
I wasn't
what?
really sure what to expect
one little
from
thing
her.
I really liked actually is like when her marriage deteriorated, because of whatever they saw, and there was only kind of an expositional scene through a montage where Jess was comforting her when she cried.
Yeah.
And then like the next interaction we have with Pinky, she's covering for her. They'd had a real argument.
And she was
She
still
blamed
quite
her,
Yeah.
and then they only just showed in a montage how she'd obviously comforted her through it, and then they resolved it. I thought that was quite cool,
I agree.
and they did it in a neat way.
Pinky was a good character.
Yeah.
I thought.
I'm happy.
So
to
they're
be
all
on
either
the
good
higher end,
or fine.
Yeah, I'm thinking at least 7.
I was thinking 7. I don't know if I could ever say it was an 8 for character.
No, probably not. I mean, 8's great.
8 is great, and I would say it was all good and some totally fine.
Yeah.
Joe was, yeah.
Joe was my least favourite, but I did like Jess.
It was enough to balance him out that I'd be happy with a 7.
Let's go 7.
Dialogue.
Not the worst.
Better than In Time.
I preferred it to In Time. Genuinely some funny moments, but also mostly a bit soapy, and
I'm going to
not
go out
very
on a
funny.
limb here and say Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes got a 6, and for me, they were both just something enough in dialogue wise. It wasn't a standout thing. It wasn't an atrocious thing. It was just there.
What's in our 5? What's that 5?
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men. Let's go 6.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay. 6 is, for me, 6.0.
6 is mixed. 6 is mixed.
And it was mixed.
Okay,
Okay,
that was one where
great.
it really was mixed.
Performance. So,
Okay.
I approached this inquisitively because I'm never really sure on this stuff. But for me, I didn't really like the way that Keira Knightley played her character.
No, I agree. I
performance-wise.
think we were being a bit fair with her. Keira Knightley and also Jonathan Rhys-Meyers
Playing Joe.
Not great.
I thought there were some moments where I was confident that what was on paper was one thing, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was that he was doing, and I think he was fucking it up.
Very handsome though.
Yeah, in some shots, really good looking, and then in other shots, looked very weedy and
Yeah.
unwell.
I thought him and Keira Knightley are very model good looking.
Yeah,
looked
you
like
can see them
models.
doing Urban Outfitters shoots and stuff.
Yeah.
So, performance-wise, Keira Knightley and Joe's actor, both for me were not good, maybe bad. Mm-hmm. And then generally across the board, everyone else was pretty good.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that Paminda Nagra was really good. I thought she did a
was
really
really
good job.
good. Yeah.
I'd say the best performance
Which was very important to the film because she's such a critical character.
It's tough sometimes being the lead and being the best performance.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're supposed to be a bit of an everyman character, she did really well. She understated it well.
Totally agree.
So you've highlighted 7 for us there.
So we can see the 8s and the 6s as well adjacent to them. So
well,
what did we say?
8,
we said there were a couple of borderline bad, and then generally across the board, everyone else was fine, bordering good, and then Jasminder's actress, who I forgot the name of, was very good.
Yeah,
that sounds like a 7 to me. The way that's laid out there.
7 or 6, isn't it? Probably 7. Let's go 7.
I feel like to me it's 6 is mixed, but 6 is mixed bordering on slightly not good, if you know what I mean. Like if I give something
6 is mixed, depending on how we feel when we're talking about
like everything. So we land on 7.
Let's go 7.
Okay, I'm really sorry, here, guys, but visuals, it really was not good.
Was there anything redeeming? Like even for the time, it felt older than 2002. Like it was visually. I know when we say it was dated, it felt very much like the setting was very late 90s, early 2000s, but the camera work and the shot selection, the filters, the cinematography, it felt like it was a TV movie from the early 90s, which
I wasn't keen at all on.
Like you're talking, what came out in 2002? What came out near then? So 2000, Crouching Tiger came out in 2000, which is visually an unbelievable
way
spectacle.
better. It's still pretty
2014, well, Team America doesn't really count, does it? But like 5 years later, we've got Superbad, which I know these have bigger budgets, but like it can't just be British budget. It felt like it had less than 5 million.
I agree. I think that there were some things which there was a lot of things were forgivable, but there were some things which you can't attribute to just budget and time and style.
Yeah.
There were some things where it was just like I just think that was bad.
And even like the shots, like the ball tracking.
Yep.
Like the POV of the ball, like
another film.
I know, but this one was even worse.
Yeah, at least it didn't make me feel ill.
Yeah, that's true. But like the final shot at the end where the ball is going in the net, and then for some reason
the keeper does the worst.
The keeper completely misses it, and it zooms in on the keeper's face as it goes past.
Oh,
like
no.
that looked cheap.
So does that land us? I'm going to throw a number out here, 4.
I was thinking lower.
Yeah.
I think 4 would be a bit. I think 4 would be kind. I would go 3.
I think 3. I think that you could do worse, but you'd have to be pretty bad to do worse. But there is worse out there.
Yeah.
Visually.
Yeah, I think we'd have to be really. It would have to be quite upsetting to be a 2, and then 1 we're talking like the worst visual spectacle.
Watch it.
1 is offensive.
Like, yeah. I think that's 1 is offensive, and it wasn't offensive. Was it?
Yeah, it's just not good.
I tell you what, it'll do all right in sound.
Great soundtrack.
Yeah, so I'll highlight the 7s, so you can see what's around there. Obviously. Sound, you've got sound effects and you've got music, right? That's kind of your 2 major categories.
I'm mainly thinking of the music.
Yeah, sound effects. But when we do the sound category, some films will deserve attention paid to sound effects. In this one, sound effects, unimportant. I don't think will make a difference to the score. Soundtrack, really cool. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I don't know if... I tell you what I'd say was missing from the soundtrack for me was they were cool, enjoyable songs, but not once did they ever make me feel like a super emotional response that was correct for the scene, if you know what I mean.
Okay, that's fair. I like, for instance, Superbad we did, and they had the soundtrack was almost a stylistic choice. Like, it was kind of Motown, black and soul music from the 70s, like a real influence there. This, it had kind of mainly like relevant pop tunes from the time. So it transported you back. Like you had songs from Victoria Beckham, I think Mel C as well.
Not Mel B.
Maybe Mel B, one of them.
Faye said Mel B yesterday, and she's dead into that stuff.
Oh, okay,
so.
it's probably Mel B. There was a great Inner Smile by Texas, really good.
Okay.
Atomic Blondie, that was cool. There was also Nessun Dorma was in there at some point, which is classical tune, been sung by Pavarotti a few times, and it is a very famous like tenor song. And I believe it's been sang I think it was sang at Italian 90, which was 1990 World Cup.
Okay.
I believe Pavarotti sang it on the opening day, famously. He definitely did it once. We might need to fact check that. But I think that's why they chose to do it. It's and they used it at some point. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
it was great tune
I like
as well.
that.
I think the soundtrack was really good, and it should get a decent score.
I think for me, the question is whether it manages an 8 or not.
Yeah.
That's really where
I think sound design, soundtrack scores, they have the opportunity to get very high scores, and those would be, kind of 10s are like game-changing, most famous scores of all time. 9s
up there with them, but maybe just not the same influence.
Recognizable, but also maybe they've got a kind of clear direction. Yeah. I'm happy to give this an 8 because of the quality of the songs. I think elevate it beyond average.
Yeah,
or even like good.
Okay, I think I would go 7.5 if I could, and so I'm okay with an 8.
It's good. It's good.
I feel like it's more than a 7 for me, but I wonder if for it to get an 8 for me personally, it would want to have more of a kind of emotional impact. But I'm quite happy to go with 8 because I think that there's an argument to definitely be made for it. Do you know what I mean? But
for sure.
Okay, so genre realization. I think given what you were saying earlier, this is going to score very high here.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out if it's a 10 or not. Because there are reasons why it's
Remind everyone what it is first.
What genre realization
including me.
Very simple. What genre is it? How well did it realize that genre?
Okay,
so let's decide what genre.
Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
That's how I'd tell a 5-year-old. I'd say, now tell me, young Timmy, what would you score Bend It Like Beckham in the genre realization category? So we work out what the genre was, and then how much does it typify or exemplify that genre. If it's a classic of the genre, usually it gets a 10.
Yeah.
If it's really representative in any other way, then it will also score well. And if it's aiming, let's say it's like this is a mob film that is really misses the mark on those elements, then it would score.
Which it would have done if it was a mob film.
If it was a mob film, it would do quite badly. Bend It Like Beckham.
Not a very good mob film.
Wasn't a good mob film.
And for that reason, you should not watch this film.
Right.
Yeah, so I think really one of the things that is worth paying attention to of genre realization is the idea is that if it's a horror, it should and it's horrifying, it should score high. If it's a comedy and it's funny, it should score high. And you're trying to get that sort of like, has it achieved the thing?
If it's a sports film and it's sporty.
Yeah, I mean, like, is it a football film? Because I don't really think it is a football film, really.
No. Proper sports films, they're always... They do typically have some sort of goal they're trying to achieve. You just laugh at the word goal.
No.
They do have some aim they're trying to shoot at. So, which they do. They've got the stakes of the score. The score's still laughing. You're laughing.
I'm trying my best not to, which is making it harder.
I'm
just not going to look at you.
So they're aiming to get the scholarship, for fuck's sake.
I can't.
Should we just give it a 10? I don't think it's one of the great sports films.
No.
It's a great within the football landscape because it's the the best-selling football film of all time. We really don't have much heavy competition for football films.
That's true. The influence is there.
Impact, cultural impact, and significance for female football, which I really do believe it had a real significant impact on grassroots female football certainly in the UK, and I guess representation, like British Asian athletes within certainly football. It's very low. It's at that time.
Yeah,
there has been more since, but it's historically been a very low representation.
Yeah.
So that was massive. I think for if you're a young British Asian kid watching Bend It Like Beckham, it's rare to see a film about young British Asians, but then to have one about young British Asian women to do with football, to do with sport. I think that was really quite groundbreaking.
I'm going to make a case for a 10.
Okay.
It really kind of did a different thing to what a lot of other. It's not really necessarily a football or sports film, and it's but it does have that in there. And whatever genre it is in, the influence and the impact that it has had is undeniable. And so that kind of for me feels like that should be a 10 by that.
Yeah, for maybe if this was like cultural impact as a category. It would be, which it kind of has become, the cultural impact category. But if we're sticking to genre realisation, I don't think it should be a 10 because I don't think it's enough of an impactful sports film. If it's a rom-com, I don't think
definitely not a rom-com.
They said on the things I watched, they were like, it is a rom-com, which it really didn't hit the mark for me in that. If that's
it didn't hit rom or com very well.
If they were aiming for that, they missed.
Neither rom nor com, nor football. Not really sure what this film is, apart from trash.
Was this a film?
It's just a soap.
So, for that reason, I personally, my definition of genre realisation, I wouldn't give it a 10. But for cultural impact, if we had that as a category, I would.
I feel like we should have cultural impact as a category, but
probably be better than.
Should we change it now? Is today the day?
A lot of the 10s would stay 10s.
I don't think we'd have to change that much. I don't think we'd have to do very much. I think we could probably just leave it, to be honest, and not even look. No one will ever know.
Let's leave it just for today and then work out after.
Oh, I put it in the wrong box.
Goof. What did you put there? I reckon give it an 8.
I'm going to go with that because I don't really know what genre realisation is.
Yeah, we'll give it an 8 and we'll see what it gets.
Okay, so the Mate Night podcast, for God's sakes, has now rated Bend It Like Beckham in 9 different categories. We have ranked it the following. Fred, 5.3 for enjoyment. Jambo, 6.2 for enjoyment. Plot, 4 out of 10. Character, 7. Dialogue, 6. Performance 7, visuals 3, sound 8, genre realisation 8, giving it an average score of 6.06 out of 10, which makes it the... Drum roll, please, Fred. 23rd greatest film of all time. Let's go. Well done.
Let's go.
It also happens to be the 3rd worst film of all time. until further notice.
23rd greatest because we respect women.
That's why it is the 23rd greatest film. We've only done 25 films. Okay, great. So, that's definitely 25. Yeah. Thanks so much for listening. And we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers. Thanks.
Oh, hi, Dave, by the way.
Dave.
Sorry,
Dave.
I never said hi to you, Dave.
Sorry, Dave.